Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this inaugural conference entitled the Central Asia, 30 Years of Independence, Challenges and Opportunities. So today's an important event because it's a joint conference which has been organized by the University of Westminster in London and ourselves, WIUT, Westminster International University in Tashkent. So basically what the aims of this particular conference are is to kickstart the Westminster Forum for Uzbek and Silk Road Studies. And I would say that there's an awful lot of history behind Uzbekistan and culture in Uzbekistan, yet we don't really talk about it in terms of research. And this is our opportunity to basically put ourselves on the map because I think there's an awful lot of opportunities that is going to be created in Uzbekistan over the next 20, 30 years. And I think basically the most important thing is that we've got the youth behind us, and brains always gives us intelligence and knowledge and the ability to create. And I would say that as Harry Dent wrote in 2002, The Great Depression Ahead, he predicted basically that Central Asia will be the future of the world. And this is a chap who actually predicted the financial crisis going back in 2002, and he predicted the financial crisis to take place in 2009. So the aim is basically the forum itself, as I mentioned, acts as a platform for debate, discussion, also dissemination of research, public engagement on certain issues and topics related to Uzbekistan, Central Asia, and also on the Silk Road itself. So the region, as I mentioned earlier, that there is a dearth of knowledge on this particular area. And this is one of the fundamental aims of this particular conference, of what we're actually trying to achieve. This will be the first of many conferences and research papers between our universities. And it's always nice to include others as we sort of build momentum in this particular area, on this particular field. 4 areas that we're going to concentrate on today and those will include papers and discussions, is law, politics, and society. Business and enterprise is our second theme. Science, technology, and innovation, education and development as well. So the 4 areas that we're actually looking at today will incorporate papers, presentations from speakers today, and we'll know a lot more today at the end of this particular conference itself. We're living in a time of opportunity, and I think basically it is great opportunity. It's a great time in Uzbekistan, but considering that we have a lot of youth, education is expanding, and we've seen basically a particular growth of even higher education. You know, that's actually moved from just in 5 years from 9% of engagement to over 25% young people going into higher education. We're seeing basically construction, 9% growth last year. We're actually having a growth rate in Uzbekistan of about between 5 and 6%. And the president has decreed that there will be 11.8 million foreign tourists coming to Uzbekistan by 2025. And this is basically part of forming of a wider strategy within Uzbekistan, not only just in Uzbekistan, but to basically connect the whole of the Karabakh region. And that means basically infrastructure will be created through roads, through private-public partnerships, and so forth. And that comes, you know, at a cost, but it's a well-worthy cost as well, because I believe that heritage culture is very much untapped within Uzbekistan. And that means basically hotels will be created, just like the hotel we have across the road. The government wants 3,400 hotels by 2025. Tour operators will basically be created, 1,400 major tour operators, and that means basically more employment as well. So I believe that there is a tremendous opportunity. You know, even despite the pandemic, we have seen basically growth, you know, where other countries around the world have seen decline as well. So I think it's a great time, and I'm sure that in the papers that you're going to see this afternoon, there is evidence that there is a great future ahead for Uzbekistan as well. Some of the papers that we're going to produce today will be published in the Silk Road, a journal of Eurasian development that we've actually created here between ourselves, University of Westminster and Westminster International University in Tashkent. I'm going to basically acknowledge two key people within our organizations today. We have the Vice Chancellor of the University of Westminster, Dr. Peter Bonfield, who's come in today, obviously to address you in the opening remarks. And also we have Bakram Murgasov, who's our rector of the university. It's a partnership which is nearly 20 years old. Actually, in January, we'll be celebrating our 20th birthday at the university, and it'll be a fantastic time ahead for us because we've grown as well. We've reached some milestones within our own university of over 5,000 students. We've created programs which are really needed for this particular country. For example, the Masters of Science in Public Health Sciences, which is really, really fundamental in this particular part of the world. And this is new for Uzbekistan and also for Central Asia too. So without any ado, I'm going to pass the microphone over to our Vice Chancellor of the University of Westminster, Dr. Peter Bonfield.
Thank you very much, Michael. And well, good morning, everyone here. It's great to see you all. And to colleagues back in London, it's welcome as well to this event. It's the kickoff. It's the first event we've got for our Forum for Uzbek and Silk Road Studies. It's a really interesting area, huge, as well as the topics we're covering today, which of course we'll look back and look at today and look forward, which embraces the topics we've got like around science, technology, law, society, and politics. Also, of course, culture, community, and art is a really important underpinning theme that I've no doubt will come out in future workshops, as is the sort of aspects around the built environment that you've described. So it's a really important and rich vein of research, education, knowledge exchange topics. Good morning. To get engaged in and work on together, and to really think about what's happened in the past, and again how that informs the future in a very, very changing world, in a part of the world and in a country that is so moving so quickly and so dynamically to creating a new future. So it's great to be here. It'll be really interesting to hear the papers later and to hear some of the discussions that occur. Thank you. And as you said, Michael, as well, it's poignant for us because we reached almost 20 years of being a partnership together. And we've grown from the very beginning of 120 students in our first year through to the 5,000 or so we have today. It's a remarkable achievement. WIUT, of course, is ranked #1 in Uzbekistan for its performance as a university. So that's not only has the partnership grown and flourished, but it also is really the benchmark for Uzbekistan and the university higher education sector as it moves forward. There are all sorts of new entrants into the university sector. And in the last few years as well, the number of people going to university has grown from 9% to 27% as well. So, you know, higher education and the university sector is playing a major role in Uzbekistan's development, and it's only set to flourish further. So all of you here at WIUT have a lot to be proud of in terms of what's been achieved and where you are now. We're also incredibly proud of this relationship and this partnership. It's very much a two-way street. We learn together, we improve together. We educate and research many young people and people who are working through their career to help them go out and be very good citizens and to make a real difference and positive impact in the world of work. So that's really, really flourishing. And we're looking forward to January. Well, we're going to enjoy today. We're going to enjoy the graduations later this week, the first physical graduations we've had here for some while. So they'll be very, very welcome. And very much look forward to growing our partnership and progress going forward. So wonderful to be here. Let's really enjoy our event. Let's be curious about what we hear. Let it stimulate our thinking, to think how we further our research and our educational endeavors and knowledge exchange endeavors together. And I'd like to conclude by thanking very much the organizing committee that have put this event together. It's a really good thing to do. And in particular, all my colleagues here at WIUT who have made us feel so welcome in Tashkent for this event. So thank you very much. And I'll pass on to the rector, Ron, who will address you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
So, assalamu alaikum, dear colleagues, dear students, and those of you who are joining us online. So, this is a forum dedicated for Uzbek and Silk Road studies, which is done for the first time in a blended format. So we have people joining us here in the room physically at Westminster International University in Tashkent, and those who are joining us throughout the world online this morning. So I would like to thank Dr. Peter Bonfield for your warm welcome and for physically being here and traveling over after 19 months of isolation in the UK. So, and I would like to thank the colleagues who organized this forum for the tremendous work for putting this event and very interesting agenda for the whole day. Unfortunately, some people couldn't be here physically, and some people, because of weather conditions today, we have our first snow in Tashkent, couldn't join us. But besides all of those things, I think we're going to have a great event, and I look forward to hearing and listening to the presentations in the afternoon. So for me, this forum is a joint initiative between the University of Westminster and Westminster International University in Tashkent. Its mission is to build strong research links across the region of Central Asia, nurture especially early career researchers, and stimulate intellectual interest in the Central Asian region. The forum agenda, as you can notice, is interdisciplinary in nature, and it's also by design, because the questions we address in Central Asia require interdisciplinary solutions to them. So we started this journey with the Silk Road, a journal of Eurasian development, published by the University of Westminster Press, managed by colleagues here, myself and others. So, and now we have this forum inaugurating here after 2-3 years, And it's a dream come true for me personally. And I would like to thank again the leadership of the University of Westminster to support us in this space. So the forum, I believe, will be the leading space and platform to attract the best scholars and students to the region. And the objectives are simple: to produce new knowledge, original knowledge, focusing on the region, and producing new data sets, new papers, new manuscripts, and new debates, and also come up with new questions and new answers to those decade-old, century-old questions. So in the last 5 years, Central Asia went through a different energy and big reform agenda. And we celebrate today 30 years of independence, yet at the same time, we in January celebrate the 20-year partnership. So if you look back, 20 years out of 30 years, we had a strong partnership between two universities, educating thousands of young students. So that's, to me, amazing. And if you look back in 2002, when I was a foundation student here, no assumptions could be made about the future of the partnership. So it was challenging at times, I believe, yet today it's very rewarding to see the partnership flourish. So in Central Asia, some presidents and scholars are coining the spirit of Central Asia is re-emerging as a world region, moving fast and confidently. So some say it's with an enlightened past. Some also argue it's lost, that it hopes to bring back with the third renaissance. So Central Asia historically was a mover and shaker of culture, arts, and sciences because it was an open region and it was open to new ideas. So Central Asia is a region today faces common challenges, and also those challenges bring new opportunities. And some of those I will list, and hopefully some of our speakers will address them. So on top of my agenda is climate change. So this is a common challenge for the region, and I think should be tackled with force and urgency that it requires. Second one is new technologies in cybersecurity, digitization, and the broadband infrastructure in rural areas. The third is Afghanistan, and our common address the situation in the alongside our borders with Afghanistan. The fourth is quality of education and the infrastructure for public health. Given the COVID we just had, the pandemic. The fifth is migration and trade across borders. So it's this region produced a lot of migrants who work high skill, low skill in different parts of the world, in Russia, in South Korea, Turkey, Europe, US. So, and that requires good governance for them, for people and goods to move across borders. The next is sustainability and sustainable development goals agenda, and also poverty reduction in the region. And the last is how, as a region, we address human rights and tackle corruption. So those are some of the I see as common challenges facing the region, but also I think that we together today tackle some of those questions openly with constructive debate and intellectual curiosity as mentioned today. So I wish everyone a very productive forum, and I'm very excited to see all of you here and those who are joining us online. So thanks very much for joining and for your interest. And with that, I'll stop and I'll introduce our next speaker, Abd Hakim. Dr. Abd Hakim is a big supporter of the university. He's an associate professor of economics here, but full-time he's the director of the Center for Economic Research and Reform under the President's administration. So, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. So It is honor, Dr. Peter Bonnefil, Bahramaka. It is honor to be a part of this very good event, which the Westminster initiated. So the last time I was invited to the Westminster conference, I think it was 6 years ago. So yeah, the Westminster started very good initiative. This forum for Uzbek and Silk Road studies, especially concentrating on the Central Asia, which is really, really important for all development processes in the region. So what is Central Asia? So in the Central Asia, if you look to the region, it is about the 75 million people who are living and generating about $270 billion worth of gross domestic product. So if you look to this region, 5 years ago, this region had almost no ties because we produced similar products and we didn't have very much trade in the Central Asia. So because of our liberalization policies, our trade with the Central Asian countries increased almost 3 times. The peoples, going across the border increased almost 2.5 times. So even, if you look to the 5 years ago to the Afghanistan, if 5 years ago, trade with Afghanistan was almost zero. So right now we are trading about $800 million worth of goods and services with Afghanistan. So if you look to the inside of the Central Asia, we have almost 7 to 10% of our external trade happens within the Central Asian countries. So it is not enough. If you look to the ASEAN countries, it is about like 25%. So these scholars who got together today, I think that you will address these things, why, what we can do further in order to intensify these trade activities. So when we look to the trade with the Central Asia, we also see the South Asia, which is kind of big opportunity. If you look to the South Asia, so this is the region with 1.9 billion population and $3.3 trillion worth of gross domestic product. If you looked at our trade with the South Asian countries, it's almost 4% of our trade goes to the South Asian countries. So what we trading, what countries are most becoming important? If you look to this, more than 50% of our trade with the South Asian countries, it's Afghanistan. So why? Because we have this infrastructure with Afghanistan, railroad, and if you look at the main food products, energy products, which are exported from the Central Asian countries, it goes to the Afghanistan. So in order to intensify these trades, we are kind of looking forward. So these large infrastructure projects should connect the regions of the Central Asian and the South Asian. So we are talking about CASA 1000 project, which will enable to increase, the export of the electricity from the Tajikistan and the Kyrgyzstan to the South Asian countries. It's almost 5 billion kilowatt hours of energy we can export if this infrastructure project worth of $3 billion will be accomplished. Another project we are looking forward and we are continuing to doing it. It's like Termes, Mazar-e-Sharif, Kabul, Peshawar Railroad. So it is large, very large project, and it will decrease our transportation costs almost 3 times, and the duration of the transportation, our goods and services to the ocean, almost, more than 3 times. So another project we are looking forward to, the large gas pipelines from the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. So these kind of large projects we are kind of discussing in these days. So the infrastructure projects will be very interesting for us, for the Uzbekistan and for all other things. And one more thing that, the Central Asian countries, they have lots of energy resources, gas, oil, and, the hydro energy powers. For example, if you look to the Tajikistan and the Kyrgyzstan, we are exploiting only 5% of our capacity in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. So only way of kind of doing this solar energy, the capacity for the Uzbekistan, for other countries, it's what we can, if we can compensate this energy with the hydropower. So this shows that, the Central Asian countries, they are complements to each other. so that they have to be together, they have to be in one system, and they have to kind of further improve their trade relations, not only with the Central Asian countries, with other regions also. So if you look to our trades. So the Bahram mentioned, very good point, you know, the future, you know, the economic policy directions. So as you know, that Uzbekistan accomplished 5-year intensive, you know, the reforms. So now we are kind of, you know, the preparing next 5-year plan and strategy, I would say, the strategy. So in this strategy, if you see that one of the main KPIs or the main goals of the strategy is reduction of the poverty in Uzbekistan by 2 times. So we acknowledge that, you know, the fast growth with the large investments and the large capital investments, it is really expensive without, you know, the growing inclusively, you know, without growing socially, without taking care, you know, the nature or the green economy. Yes, the growth will be very expensive in the long run. So that's why for the next 5 years, we are looking forward to further intensify our energy efficiency, so that we will increase the, you know, the alternative energy sources to up to the 25% in the next 5 years. So this will enable us to save, you know, the 3 billion, you know, the cubic meters of natural gas. So as you can see that we started new green projects and the, you know, the solar projects, hydro projects, and, you know, the wind projects. It is about 5 megawatt projects. It's a 25% of our capacity. So the next thing is, like, you know, poverty reduction will be, as I mentioned, it will be one of the main important directions of our economic policy. And I think that this will be main directions for the other Central Asian countries also. So the migration, yes, it is really interesting for us. So I hope that today we will hear, you know, the new studies about the migration. And we know that in Uzbekistan, we have totally changed our migration policy. We you know, we started huge migration support programs. So now in Uzbekistan, people, for example, if in the previous years, even 2% of the migration wasn't, you know, the organized migration. So they kind of find some works and they left to this work. So right now we reached up to the 30% of this work to the organized. So it gives us more kind of safety for our migrants, and, you know, so the income of the migrants will be larger, because, you know, the training programs, you know, the vocational training programs for the migrations are started. And, you know, now they can find better jobs with a better quality and a better life in the going countries. So overall, you know, I can speak a lot. So the making short, you know, it is really good event. So we really looking forward to hear more new studies, which will be based for our new policy implications. So as a person who is working in the research or the think tank of the, you know, the presidential administration, I always say to my colleagues that every research should lead us to one policy change. So I hope that today's event will give us more policy implications, policy recommendations, and I wish good luck to the work of this conference. Bahram, good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hakimov. Very interesting, and I know you can, you know, say a lot more. You're very passionate about this. So in the last minute, we had few surprising cancellations, but at the same time, we had lots of friends of the region who sent us their video messages dedicated to the inauguration of the forum. We have so many, but we, because of time, we select only 4, and the rest we will just upload on our website. So the first one we will play is Professor James Pickett. So he's an associate professor of history at the University of Pittsburgh. And he just recently published the book, Polymaths of Islam, Power and Networks of Knowledge in Central Asia. Very interesting book. I hope you guys get to read it when you have a chance. So here's his message for the forum. Please.
My name is James Pickett, and it's my great pleasure to offer my congratulations to the people of Uzbekistan for 30 years of independence. I offer these words from the University of Pittsburgh in the United States, where I'm an associate professor in the history department. I was asked to offer a few words on the theme of this conference, challenges and opportunities for Uzbekistan 30 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. As a historian with research based largely on sources from Uzbekistan, I thought it might be appropriate to say a few words about the importance of historical collections located in Uzbekistan. In short, the manuscripts and documents located especially in the city of Tashkent are of monumental importance, not just for Uzbekistan, but for the history of Central Asia as a whole, and also for the Islamic world more broadly. This is for historical reasons. In 1865, the city of Tashkent became the first major urban center that the Russian Empire conquered in the sedentary areas of Central Asia. Tashkent therefore became the capital of the Russian Governor Generalship of Turkestan, which meant that the vast bureaucratic paper trail detailing Russian administration anywhere in Central Asia came to be stored largely in that city, in Tashkent. Then during the 1920s, in the first decade of Soviet rule, Central Asia was divided up into the 5 republics that are familiar to us today. However, even after the national delimitation, Tashkent was built up to be the central city for the entire region of Central Asia. This meant that many of the cultural artifacts of the entire region were collected and then relocated to libraries and research centers in Tashkent specifically. The point I'm getting at is this: whether you're interested in the classical Silk Road, manuscript culture in the Timurid Empire, or Russian administration of what is now Kyrgyzstan or Fergana Valley, the vast majority of those documents and cultural artifacts are actually located in Uzbekistan. My own book is based on research in Russia, Tajikistan, and India, but the lion's share of the sources that I use are from the Al-Biruni Institute of Oriental Studies and also the State Archive of Uzbekistan, both of which are located in Tashkent. It's hard to overstate the importance of these collections. The collection at the Al-Biruni Institute is one of the largest in the world, comparable in scope to libraries in places like Cairo or Istanbul. The contents of these manuscripts pertain not just to Central Asia, but to the entire Islamic world. The state, or now National Archive of Uzbekistan, is equally crucial to the region's history. The National Archive is where the records of the Kokand, Bukharan, and Kievan Khanates are held. These stand as some of the few exemplars of pre-colonial Turco-Persian government practices anywhere in the world. The opportunities inherent in this rich cultural legacy are obvious. It's easy to imagine scholars of the Islamic world writ large traveling to Uzbekistan in huge numbers in order to tell new histories of Central Asia's rich Silk Road past. Tashkent has the potential to become the epicenter for international collaboration on the study of Central Asia and its Islamic past. Naturally, with all opportunities come some challenges as well. Access to these world-class institutions in Uzbekistan was quite limited during the Soviet period, but even after 1991, access has been inconsistent, especially for international scholars. The processes still in place for obtaining access to these historical collections remains opaque, complicated, and time-consuming, which does deter some international scholars who might otherwise have chosen to spend their research time in Tashkent. However, there is good reason for optimism. It is already becoming much easier to gain access to these collections over the last several years. And international collaboration is increasing in leaps and bounds, and many of you are undoubtedly aware of this fact. I myself hope to return to Tashkent for an extended research stay this coming year and look forward to meeting many of you then. In the meantime, congratulations on 30 years of independence and have a great conference.
So our second speaker who sent her little message is Professor Reese Grogan. She's the professor of economics at the University of Guelph, Canada. And she's also the co-editor-in-chief of our own journal, Journal of Eurasian Development.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Louise Grogan. I'm a professor at the University of Guelph in Canada, and I'm part of the Silk Road, a journal of Eurasian development. And I would like to welcome you to the forum for Uzbek and Silk Road studies. And I would like to talk just a bit about the challenges and opportunities that I see facing Central Asian countries in the next few years. I am somebody who spent 4 years in Dushanbe in Tajikistan, and most of my comments will be about Tajikistan because that's the country I know best. So unlike any other Central Asian country of the former Soviet Union, Tajikistan had a civil war which ended in 1997. Nevertheless, like other countries in the region, there's a large human capital and infrastructure legacy. There's now more freedom to farm vegetables and fruits for exports, and as a result, less pressure to farm cotton and to sell to jinners locally. So this freedom is very good, as well as the opening of the Tajik-Uzbek border. This helps farmers find bigger markets, particularly in the Subt region and Fergana. Another positive legacy of the Soviet period, certainly for all countries of Central Asia, is the relatively high labor force participation rates and low fertility rates of women. I usually use household survey data to do my work, and so I'll do that here. We can see from anthropometry data heights of people who grew up in the Soviet period and compare those to heights of people who grew up now. That way, even in the absence of consumption information or health information for that period, we have a kind of summary measure of what life was like for people growing up. Because in general, there's very little ethnic component to height, and people have greater height when their nutritional situation and disease environment was better. So in table 1, we can see that heights did decrease in Tajikistan, which experienced civil war, by about 7 centimeters during the initial period following independence. In Kyrgyzstan, they did not. They remained about the same. Younger people in Kyrgyzstan are about the same height as older people. I should say this is only for women because I only have data for women. For Afghanistan, though, we can see that there was a decrease in heights of nearly 2 centimeters during this period. The higher labor force participation of women, certainly relative to income per capita in former Soviet Union countries, persists, and we can see that in table 2. Even Tajikistan has relatively high participation, say, compared to Pakistan or Nepal, or even richer countries like India. If we look at table 3, we can see that the countries with the biggest amount of migrants are Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. We know that those two countries are dependent for nearly about 30% of their revenues or GDP per capita on remittances. And this is a household safety line, but it's also vulnerable to the Russian economy and to Russian politics. So this is a challenge for those countries to have more local economic opportunities and to reduce their dependencies on remittances and also on imported goods, particularly imported food. However, if we want to look on the bright side, we can see that years of schooling completed, even in Tajikistan, remain high in these most recent data from life in transition surveys. We have many other surveys that can tell us about how life has been in the past 30 years since independence. These include the multiple indicator cluster surveys of UNICEF and the demographic and health surveys of USAID. And if we use those, we can see some simple comparisons of people just outside that former Soviet Union space in northern Afghanistan and those in Tajikistan, but in a province, Badakhshan, that was previously part of Badakhshan province in Afghanistan. And we can see there the Soviet legacy as well. Women are much taller, even in these pre-76 cohorts that were the last Soviet cohorts to grow up in Tajikistan. And these people still have higher weights and are much less likely to be underweight on the Tajik side of the border, the Panj River, than on the Uzbek side. If we look at socioeconomic characteristics of people in either side of Badakhshan province, the Tajik and the Badakhshan province, we'll find something very similar. Women have much fewer children. They're likely to have less children who've died. That's also true if we look at the youngest women in our DHS samples, aged 18 to 25. Those people in the Badakhshan of Tajikistan are not as likely to be married during this age range. They are much more likely to be working and they have more schooling and they've had many fewer children than those in Afghanistan. So overall, I'd like to report a strong legacy of high female labor force participation, lower fertility, and much greater human capital than non-former Soviet Union neighbors. Still, a lot of temporary migration, and it's facilitated by this relatively great human capital. The dependency on remittances from Russia in particular, however, is leaving households vulnerable to policies that Russia might decide to enact. It would be helpful to have much more information about these remittances. We know they're important, but household survey data doesn't tell us that all of the time. The high data for Tajikistan and Afghanistan suggest the pains of war for those cohorts that grew up during the post-1991 period. However, that's not the case for other countries in Central Asia. Assalamu alaikum. My name is
Grogan, food for thought. What happens when you have a natural experiment like Soviet Union versus Afghanistan, which was not a part of Soviet Union, but just forward the same people across the river. So continues to do research. The next speaker is Randy Feiler. He's a professor of economics at the City University of New York and the former president of Surgeon Foundation, which is the largest supporter of economics education in the former Soviet Union. So, Randy.
I'm very pleased to join the Forum on Uzbek and Silk Road Studies project and the conference today. I bring you greetings and good wishes from Sergei in Prague, from the Sergei Foundation in the United States, and from the Economic Fundamentals Initiative, all of which cooperate in many programs with Westminster International University. I think it is especially important in this conference and in Central Asia to recognize that partnerships and mutual support across institutions and across countries is critical for success. So that is especially why I'm glad that this conference is taking place and why I look forward, as soon as travel is possible, to visiting Tashkent and Westminster myself. The Sergei Foundation has had a long-standing relationship with Westminster. We offer courses both through faculty that we support located in the region and distance learning courses. And over the last 20-some years, we have reached 4,000 or more class sessions at Westminster and another 10,000 at 23 other universities in Central Asia. I am especially pleased that this conference, in its call and the project of the Silk Road Studies, is focusing on education and youth. Admittedly, we do not do a very good job in the US or the European Union in having young people understand economics and the market system. So to the extent that this initiative will help, it may be that you will show us new things. Youth is key to the development of Uzbekistan and Central Asia. Transition, while the conference says quite correctly, the call for the conference, that it is time to celebrate 30 years of successes, but it is also time to look forward. And it's critical in some sense. Communism has fallen. I remember, however, 30 years ago when I first got involved with the program at Sergei, talking to people in Central Europe, the former Soviet Union, who basically said, okay, communism is over. We'll live like West Germany in a few years. In reality, in order for Uzbekistan or the Czech Republic to catch up with West European living standards is a process of decades, not years. And this is very difficult to convey to a society. You see throughout the region, I won't name countries, but you see in many countries disappointment in the lack of a miracle coming through in political events, economic events, public opinion. So to the extent that Westminster, Sergei, and our partners can convey the message that the markets work, but they don't work overnight. They need time, they need support. It is a slow process, but it is an inevitable process if we can maintain momentum, if we can maintain and reinforce the positive steps that Uzbekistan, Central Asia, and the post-communist world in general have taken. And here, research, such as being presented in this conference, is an important endeavor. It is important that we understand what has worked, what can be improved, and how to convey the messages of success and the needs of the future in the march towards free societies, free markets, economic growth, economic stability. So I look forward to seeing the results of this conference, and I look forward to collaborating with everyone here in the future.
So, thank you to Randy. I'm sure he's sleeping. Speaker is Mark Reese. One of the oldest and written by Abdullah Farhi. After that, in English translated as Bygone Days. And he recently received the Presidential Medal Dostlik Friendship at the President. Please play.
Hello, friends. I'm Mark Reese, recipient of the Presidential Order of Dostlik from President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. You may also know me as the translator of Abdul Qadir Zukan Kumar. I'm especially honored that Dr. Bahramir Qasimov has invited me to make some opening statements for your conference on Uzbekistan, 30 years of independence, challenges and opportunities. Some of you may know that I began my experience in Uzbekistan 27 years ago this last September. So I'm just 3 years short of a 30-year experience with Uzbekistan myself. I spent a good part of my 20s, a good part of my 30s in Uzbekistan, but I've spent my entire professional career studying its language, literature, culture, to a degree its politics. And so I'm especially honored to speak with you all today at Westminster University. You are engaged in the work of learning and bettering your lives and adding to humanity through your educational and cultural pursuits. And so you sort of helped me come to grips with my 27 years of experience in Uzbekistan by addressing all these educational professionals and students and teachers. But I can say off the top of my head, when I think about Uzbekistan 27 years ago, I entered the country, there were very few maps. The only maps that they had were Soviet maps, where you could find Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kiev, and then down far below in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, right above Afghanistan, there was this place called Tashkent in Samarkand, which sounded remotely familiar. There were very few language materials at the time. And so my favorite story is that when the Peace Corps sent me my plane ticket to go to Uzbekistan as a volunteer to eventually teach in the city of Kokand, I was one of the first teachers to teach in Kokand, one of the first Americans to live there. I got the plane ticket from Peace Corps, and my dad looked at me and says, "You have absolutely no idea where you're going." I said, "No, I don't." But it's interesting to me because, the Peace Corps, in the 90s, for 30 years had been going to Ghana, Latin America, all over, but this was our first really entree into the former Soviet Union. So I got to see Uzbekistan at its earliest birth in many ways. I was honored, privileged to see the development of a republic, something that very few people got to witness in history. We were cynical. We thought that the creation of new republics was past us. But I can say when I was receiving the Order of Dostlik, Ambassador Wells made a really great statement that nothing about Uzbekistan's future 30 years ago could be assumed. Where we are today with reforms, you could not assume that 30 years ago. There was a civil war in Afghanistan after a bloody occupation from the Soviet army for 10 years. There was a civil war in Tajikistan after the fall apart of the Soviet Union. You had war in Chechnya. And so people in Uzbekistan, they were hopeful because for the first time, Uzbeks were able to speak about themselves and develop themselves on their own terms without guidance of the big hand of Moscow. So Uzbeks were able to understand themselves on Uzbek terms. Yet you had all these cautionary tales of things that were happening around Uzbekistan that we knew that we didn't want to happen. We did not want a civil war to take place in Uzbekistan over, what President Krymov used to call as Mahaligism. The idea that your identities from Bukhara, from Samarkand, from Tashkent, from Kokand. How do you form a common national identity of the people of Uzbekistan? Not just for Uzbeks, by the way. I hate to get into this discussion, but there were lots of Russians, Jews, Koreans, Tajiks, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, all sorts of ethnicities in Uzbekistan. And how do you give all of those identities a sense that they're going to participate in that republic as well? So nothing 30 years ago could be assumed about the reforms today in Uzbekistan. And in many ways, I consider sort of the Karimov period as that painful set of life lessons, on how to form a republic or not, how not to reform a republic, how not to create national identity. Nobody, to the students of Westminster, nobody gives you a manual on how to create a republic. When you become president at the fall of a 74-year empire that had a longer empire before that, a Tsarist era, when you form a republic and you have all of that historical baggage, nobody comes out and gives you a manual, page 1, how to start the Republic of Uzbekistan, how to develop the Uzbek language, how to develop or what to focus on in Uzbekistan's history, what not to focus on in Uzbekistan history, all with the idea of forming that common national identity. And we're still working on it today. A few years ago, Abdullah Qaderi was not widely acknowledged. Yet I consider the Jadids to be the true heroes of Uzbekistan within our recorded history, within our historical memory. I know Abdullah Qaderi's grandson, and he can talk about his memories. And so so now we're able to truly, after 30 years, really have this discussion, because now we have institutional memory, we have experience. I was part of the first Umeed Fund selection committee. So now all of those young kids that I selected to go to the States in Europe to study are now in positions of power. They're now vice ministers and ministers. And so President Mirziyoyev is acknowledging the youth population in ways that I never thought would be acknowledged. And I have to be honest, when I was invited after my first BBC interview about Ugan Kunlar in 2017, I was invited to an embassy event. And I was very cynical about going to that event. Okay, I'm going to get in an ambassador with a mustache and a comb over and some old gray Soviet suit. And what I got was Ambassador Javlon Vahabov. What I've got is Ahor Burhanov, Kadambey Sultanov, who's now the ambassador to Estonia. All these young professionals, and the room was full of all these young professionals. President Mirziyoyev had just become president. And there was, again, for the first time that I never thought would return after a cynical period, the first time since 27 years when I got off the plane in Uzbekistan, there was a sense of optimism. There was a sense of hope that we now have people, Uzbeks, who are now working for the World Bank, working for EBRD. Some of these Uzbek professionals that we have abroad and in Uzbekistan, like Dr. Mir Kasimov, studied in Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm located. So we both have that commonality of Vanderbilt University in Nashville that we can talk about and become colleagues over, and so I had this sense of optimism in 2017. Things had changed. Things are changing now. It's a bit frightening at times. Change is frightening. It's easy for me to say, I can always take a plane ticket home, right? At the end of the day, I spent half of my 20s, half of my 30s, all of my 40s in the US. So for as long as I've been studying Uzbekistan, I can always get on the plane home. But you all can't. This is your homeland. This is your soil. This is the land that the Jadids died for in 1938. This is the land where your forefathers built the canals, planted the cotton, dealt with ecological disaster areas. Now you've inherited a whole new set of hopes, but a whole new set of challenges. Don't screw this up. This is why you're going to Westminster University. This is why you're going to the university that you're going. You are the future leaders of Uzbekistan. When I am an old man, 20, 30 years from now, inshallah, if I'm in Tashkent, I expect you all to be in positions of power. That's your responsibility. Don't screw it up. Don't give in to Tanish village. Don't give in to the negative aspects of society that persist around the globe. You have vast hope. You have more support now than you ever had 30 years ago. You have an international community engaged that cares about the destiny of Uzbekistan. You have more investment than you've ever had. You have more tools in your tool set, but you also have 30 years of experience, hard-won experience. Take the time, learn, make that your patriotic duty to form that common identity of not just Uzbeks, but the people of Uzbekistan. I wish you all the best and more, and I hope to be in Tashkent sometime next year, inshallah. Gaplashamas. Hop, hai salamat balim.
And thank you, Mark. And our last speaker